Good morning. Now it will all come into focus. It's great to see a lot of friendly faces and actually a lot of new faces. I'm Theresa Cherniak. I'm the principal planner for community planning, and that is one of the two groups that are in the long-range planning section in the Department of Land Use and Transportation. So Erin Wardell back here is the principal planner for transportation planning, and that's the other section that's in long-range planning. So what we do is do the long-range kind of policy work for the department, as well as kind of more medium-range work. We maintain all the elements of the comprehensive plan, and that includes the community development code. So we do all the changes to our regulations, but then there's the transportation system plan that we are in charge of, the community plans, and then the comprehensive plan both for the rural and the urban area. So we have about 27 staff, full-time equivalents. That includes our admin staff, so those aren't all planners. But we do have pretty good sized staff. Each year we develop a work program that the board looks at and blesses. Part of the reason we do this is there are so many possible things we could work on, so many possible things that different people would like us to work on. So this is a chance for the public to weigh in on what we work on, and then for the board to bless it, so that we have kind of our marching orders, our agenda for what we work on each year. So we divide our work program into the 5 areas that are included on here. So ongoing work, regional planning, the comprehensive plan and community planning, transportation planning, and then we look at potential code changes. And then we also divide them into time frames. So we have 3 different tiers, tier 1, 2, and 3. And the first tier is those top tasks that we feel we can get to this year. It also includes the regulations that will move forward as ordinances this year. Tier 2 then are things that are important but maybe are slightly longer term, or we don't have the staff right now for them, but if we can, we will start working on them toward the end of the year. And then tier 3 is somewhat of a placeholder where they're important projects, important tasks, but we don't have the staffing for it this time. So each year we would look at those tasks and see if they could fund that. I don't have a lot of slides, but over the next 3 slides I'll go through a lot of the tasks that we have on our work program. And I believe on the back table we have some materials that go along with our work program. So we each year the board adopts a table that shows all of the different tasks. So that's back there, and if you'd like a copy of that, or if you want to see it, I think there's also a small card that has a lot of information on the back of that card. It has the website where you can go to look at what everything's in the work program. There's also a link there for everything that we're working on as an ordinance this year. So a number of the tasks that we work on, there are additional study things that may or may not end up in ordinances. So I'll talk through things that we're doing additional study on, and then also the things we're doing ordinances on. And then there are a number of things that are either ongoing things or a couple year things, so I'll talk about those too. A couple of things that I won't talk a lot about in the later slides, so I'll mention here. On regional planning, we do a lot of work with metro cities, other agencies like, or groups like the Willamette Water Supply Project, to do the kind of coordination that needs to be done. a lot of times it's particularly on transportation issues because our roadway system kind of weaves in and out with the cities. So a number of cities now are doing planning for their urban reserve areas or areas that have been added to the urban growth boundary. So we do participate with the cities on that. And then another one of the big things under comprehensive planning is housing affordability. That's something that the board, as a topic, has been very concerned about. And we have both a specific task to look at land use ways that we can impact housing affordability. And included in that is actually coordinating with a lot of the other agencies that do funding or other work related to housing affordability. But we also recognize that a number of the things that we work on can have an impact on the affordability of housing, both generally and for particular housing affordable for people at low incomes. So we have put a housing affordability lens on a number of the different topics or tasks that we have on our work program, such as the work we're doing on the parking code that you'll see shortly. So part of the way we do work is issues are identified, we start looking into them, identifying exactly what is the issue and how might we address it through our regulations. And that usually starts with issue papers. So these are the list of issue papers that we have this year. Some of them have actually either just been completed, like the right size in the parking code issue paper that you'll hear about next. We're also doing an issue paper on the Transportation Development Review Process Update, and that's looking at the procedures that we have for transportation safety-related conditions of development approval. Urban rural roadways and some of these other are all issue papers where we'll be exploring the issue and coming up with some different possible ways to approach it. What we do is then send these out for public review. So I believe right now the parking issue paper is out for public review. That's a chance for all of you to look at what we're considering and to weigh in, to give comments. So I do encourage you to do that. And we send out a constant contact, I believe, whenever we have an issue paper done. If you're not on our general distribution list and you would like to be, please let us know, and we will definitely add you, and then you'll get those notices. Then moving forward from issue papers, if what comes out of an issue paper is that we need to change our regulations, the way we do that is through an ordinance. We do have an interesting way of doing that at the county. It's different from anywhere else, where we are limited in the time frame where we can consider land use changes to our code, and that's in our county charter. So from March 1st to October 31st is when the Planning Commission and the board can consider here and potentially adopt changes to the regulations. So in part, that's why we're somewhat regulated, or doing the work program helps us figure out which things come to an ordinance, because we are somewhat regimented in how we need to bring these forward. So this year we have 12 potential ordinances moving forward. That's maybe a little on the high side of what we normally do. And some of the things that are coming through, this is the whole list, but just a couple, I'll focus on a couple. The parking code, we are going to be making changes to the community development code. Again, O'Neill talked about that. Our cell tower regulations, we know those are pretty out of date, and they don't align really well with the current federal guidelines, and they're somewhat convoluted. So we will be looking at reducing some of the regulations there. And then food carts is kind of a fun one for us. We don't currently have any regulations in place for food carts. So if someone comes in and wants to do a food cart, we interpret where it fits in our code based on the closest use, and the closest use is a brick and mortar restaurant, which has quite a higher level of standards maybe that are required than would really be needed for food carts. So we are looking at that, and that will be coming forward later in the year. So we'll be getting all of these on our website with a little more information, and if you're interested in any of those, we'll have a section for comments. It will also say who the contact person is, so you'll be able to provide us information, let us know if you're interested, and we'll get you involved. As far as couple year tasks, so some things we know we can't get finished with this year, and they're either ongoing or they'll be done over a couple of years. So urban planning area agreements, I mentioned we're doing work with the cities. We have agreements with each city that talks about how we do our planning together. So those are the UPAAs, or urban planning area agreements. Housing affordability is a big one. That's a couple year task. We have a couple grants that are going right now, one in Aloha, and then we also got a Metro grant for equitable housing to look at impediments to providing affordable housing, specifically looking at our code and what's going on there that we potentially could change to help with both housing affordability generally, and then for housing for people with low incomes. We do on that, we have hired a senior planner to address affordable housing. We have her as a designated point person to help facilitate specifically affordable housing projects. We're also looking at strategies to reduce fees and charges specifically for housing affordable for low incomes. We'll be looking at code revisions to increase housing options, so things like looking at our retirement communities, regulations to allow them to provide a continuum of care on a site, smaller housing units, cottage clusters, that sort of thing. We'll also be looking at ways to reduce development costs, so things like changing our parking requirements, and then whatever else we come up with through the grants, we'll be developing further. I see a typo, and I apologize. North Bethany Main Street planning is something that some of you will be interested in. That's the last piece of the North Bethany work. The little the little commercial center still needs the regulations developed before it can move forward. So we are working on that starting probably this summer. And then transportation planning for urban reserves is something that we're actually applying for a grant for, and that's to look at making sure the urban reserves have a comprehensive transportation system and funding plan figured out before all of these move forward. So it's a pretty broad range of stuff, and I know I went through it pretty quickly, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or I'll also be here after the meeting.
Any questions?
You skipped over the floodplain. So what are you doing with it?
So a couple of things. One, if you remember last year, there were changes to the FEMA floodplain maps that we needed to adopt, and so there is another update of that going on right now. There are the risk maps. Those we will need to adopt, but it looks like maybe those aren't until next year. But this is somewhat a placeholder until there was a biological opinion about what could happen in the riparian areas, and it looked like it would affect us quite a bit, but the regulations, the impacts are still being worked out. I think there might have been a court case that has been, or someone has sued on it. So it's somewhat a placeholder until we get some kind of direction from the state or FEMA or the National Marine Fisheries Service on what we need to do. Yeah.
So right now you're not implementing that NIMS decision yet?
We are not.
Other questions? Okay, we'll move on to